Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Streaming Alchemy Show. On today's show, we're going to be doing our first live interview with Floris Porro from Holographics. Now, for those who don't know Holographics, they are a very innovative live computer graphics uh, company that really has something I think that's going to be really interesting for folks that are looking for an incredibly robust solution, but something that's still very easy to use. So before we get to that, though, uh, I'd like to remind everybody that, as usual, we'll be taking live video call in from people. So if you want, just go to the URL shown here. It's probably also posted right under the link to this video. So you should be able to get to it pretty easily. If you have a question, want to make a comment or share some experience, please feel free to join us. Also, we'd love you to participate in the comments as well. Uh, there's a couple of things we're going to cover in this show that could make it interesting for you to engage. I mean, beyond just looking at holographics as a product and demoing what it can do, uh, Floris also is part of a young video production company in Amsterdam. So he will be able to share some insights into what it's like to actually start and run a video production company in today's marketplaces. So before that, though, we want to introduce something new. I'd like to ask a question each show and see if I can get some more feedback to understand your interest. So, for this show, what we really wanted to find out is what is more important to you when you are looking at live graphic solutions? Is it simplicity or flexibility? So, you can just, post whichever makes most sense for you, share any additional details in the comments, and that would be great. So, to get started, I'd like to introduce Floris Poole from Holographics. Floris,
Hey, John.
hey, how are you?
Yeah, good, good. So this is much anticipated. I think we planned this at NAB, and here we are.
Yes, so we
It's so
finally have this
exciting.
going. So, obviously, you're not coming in through a webcam. So, could you just, to start off, just tell us a little bit about your setup there and how you're streaming to
Yeah,
us?
right. Yeah, sure, right. So we're like a live streaming production company, right? So if we're gonna do a live interview, we gotta make sure we're well represented. So I've got two cameras around me, and then I've got my laptop here, which I can also put up, so I can show you the interface of holographics we're working with later. And so I've got a little companion here, a Stream Deck running companion, and then my program feed, which is getting switched by an Atom Mini over here that's going into a web presenter, and then that is coming back to you.
So, that's brilliant. I mean, I think there's a lot of solutions now for integrating what they call sort of virtual webcams into conferencing systems. So it's great because it gives you a lot more flexibility when you do interviews like this. And this is a pretty
Absolutely,
standard
yeah.
this is a pretty standard type of thing in the production space. I mean, these sort of insert studios where people from companies can just jump in. So thanks for sharing that. That's helpful.
Yeah.
So,
So this we're in our basement here, right? And
yep.
so this is kind of what most of our productions look like. I'll just quickly pan over here and close my screen so you can see. Um, it's a little bit it's improvised, and so I started setting this up about 2 hours, 2 hours ago, and I suppose that's kind of the new era of small productions that we do at Stream My Event. Um, just the improvised stuff where you have to keep things small because you got to be in and out in 4 hours and host a show in the meantime.
Yeah, I mean, I think from what I've heard from other folks, the time people have now for setup and teardown tends to be shrinking. Getting access to a facility right up
Absolutely,
front,
yeah.
as you point out, is critical. So, I mean, I'm gathering that your general model is trying to keep things as lightweight and streamlined as possible.
Yes, absolutely, yeah, and we do that across the board, right? So our cameras we use Sony FS5s most of the time. Half the time we set them to full auto because they're not operated, right? And and that actually produces a great image quality because you can see the shallow depth of field behind me. It's not bad. It's totally much better than what we would have gotten a couple of years ago.
Yeah, we're big fans of Sony camera gear. Actually, the image, the color rendering, all those things are really great. And I think with especially with sort of their mirrorless line, the quality you can get out of very small cameras is really impressive. Yeah.
Oh yeah, yeah. And have you seen the new Blackmagic Pocket camera that came out a couple days ago?
Yes,
It's got a Super
6K,
35 sensor.
6K
I
with an
know.
APS-C.
It's like
Yeah.
it's a whole new level, and they give you DaVinci with it as well, which is just it's great.
Yeah, I mean, DaVinci is one of those hidden gems. I mean, it's free at one level, but at another level, you're actually they actually have the studio edition, which is $300. But what you get, any case, is just incredible for the money. Incredible value there.
Oh yeah, oh yeah, totally with you. Yeah, and I think the genius of it is that they produce this like the cinema level camera, and then they give you cinema level color grading, editing, and audio, and like visual effects with it as well, and they give you all of that in one package for 1K. It blows my mind.
I mean, it's funny because if you think about uh, where the industry is heading, the quality of the tools and the accessibility of the tools is going up. But there still
Oh
is a
yeah,
gap in terms of skill to operate. Somebody's not going to take a Blackmagic Pocket Cinema or 4K or 6K and get great images out of that, you know, on auto, as you said, for the FS5.
oh yeah,
So
yeah.
I think there's a
At
big
the same
demand.
time, it's the accessibility of that. Like when I was in school, we had JVC, Betacam cameras, and I what we would have done if we had Blackmagic pocket cameras, I can't imagine.
So why don't we jump in to talk a bit about holographics and
Oh
what that
yeah,
does as an application? It's from what the time we've got to spend, I've been really impressed with the approach. So I think not only if you could talk not only about sort of the functionality it provides, but give us a bit of color about sort of the approach and the technology underpinning it.
sure, yeah. So holographics, we're pitching as the easiest way to add live graphics to your live show. And it was born out of a need, obviously, because here at Stream My Event, we're producing low entry live shows for every event that we can find. And we wanted to up the quality of that, and we're doing that across the board with these cool Sony cinema cameras, and with smaller switchers and everything. But the one thing that it would not appear is cheap live graphics, and that was kind of flabbergasting to me because you had all of these, Casper CG and OBS was coming up, and on the encoding side, more often than not, we're still using Flash Media Live Encoder back then, and so we were thinking, how can we do this? And then Casper CG, the open source
Yep.
playout solution, they came up with the HTML template feature. And then for me, it was like they had Flash, but I'm not a huge fan of working in Flash.
Yeah.
And so then they come up with this HTML, and I figured, well, hey, I know some HTML and I know some JavaScript, and in fact, I was a web developer before I started working at Stream My Event. So I figured one plus one is two. Let's create an application that will create live HTML graphics. And we just plug that into the Casper CG template feature, and use that to output to our whatever. But even if you have this HTML file and you got to change stuff in the HTML and the reload, and it wasn't quite working for us. So I thought we can do this much better, much quicker. And I wrote a little server application in Node.js, um, and made that interact in real time with the browser. So when you change something kind of in the database, it would appear immediately back in the browser. And now suddenly we could create names and titles and whatever and put that on Casper CG live, and not have to worry about rendering anything in advance.
So from your side, you really were approaching this as a video production person that actually knew something about coding and sort of brought the marriage of the two with an appreciation for what real video productions require, not just a, gee, this sounded like a good idea. Oh, we just saw a comment
Oh,
from Brad.
absolutely,
Thank you,
yeah.
Brad, for joining us. So, yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
Hey, Brad. Right, yeah. So no, definitely. Yeah. So I've always liked to code, which I think is kind of a necessity if you want to learn to code. Um, and I just saw an opportunity. You know, the whole standing on the shoulders of giants thing. I think it was a technological window of opportunity that opened up because there's all these kind of technologies that are now available that were not available 5 years ago. And most of them pertain actually to JavaScript, which is something that Google Chrome actually
Yep.
did some big innovations in when it first came out. They came up with a new JavaScript engine, and then that was capable of server-powered systems. And that is nowadays it's used for stuff like the companion tools and a bunch of other open source projects relating to broadcast are using that system. And it's so powerful that when I started diving into kind of the options, the things that I could do with it, um, it made total sense to build an application on that. And it's a little unorthodox to kind of have this sort of server system and
Yep.
wrap that into a desktop application. But then people started doing that as well. And a lot of desktop applications nowadays are based on the same infrastructure, like Slack, for example. You might
Yep.
know it.
Yep. Well, I mean, everything in production today is bits ultimately. So,
Yeah.
being on the programming side is really just a critical piece of being on the engineering side of video production. You can't sort of disconnect the two anymore.
Yeah, I think yes and no. I think there are a lot of people really deep into a live stream production that know nothing about programming. What I think is unique about the situation we're in is that kind of everything is moving over to one single protocol, which is TCP/IP.
Yep.
Everything from the Blackmagic control to some of the camera controls to now graphics and NDI, and everything is moving to network, right? And so therein lies also a very big window of opportunity to do a bunch of innovations. Yeah, with network enabled things, and holographics is one of them.
Yeah, and I mean, you just also held up the companion component, using the Stream Deck. I mean, that's another example of something which is just sort of network based control, cross computer communications to provide some type of function in the workflow.
Absolutely, yeah. And what they've done at Companion is really clever as well because they've open sourced the entire application. And once that became popular, now suddenly you have, a small army of people writing support for all of these massive amounts of broadcast equipment. And the best part is it's open source, right?
Yep.
So as long as it's open source, you cannot just utilize it for your own stuff, and other people can utilize it, but you can also get kind of that army of people working on it.
Yeah, I mean, there are so many amazing things that are coming out in the open source space right now. So we're definitely impressed by what's available from you know graphics, from switching, from anything from a control point of view. All of that stuff is really great. So one of the other things that when we've been talking about sort of the role of IP is NDI. And so, a part of what we're doing in this production is taking a feed from uh, everything that you're doing and communicating that all over NDI. So, from your side, I think that NDI is probably opening up some opportunities as well, not just in streamlining, but also in terms of the types of workflow you can put together.
Oh yeah, absolutely. on a sidebar, I am just kicking off our server off the network, which has just started pushing up our backups to our backup service. So that's why my internet quality is degraded a little bit. I hope you can still hear me.
Yeah, we we
Um,
we can still hear you. So
so that should be clearing up in just a minute. Yeah, NDI, we haven't used it that much yet. I'm afraid to admit we use it sometimes when we need to kind of like grab a screen from someone and we weren't prepared for it, or if we like have to send a signal between places where we don't have SDI yet.
yep,
Um, and holographics, the only way to get NDI out of holographics at the moment is through vmix or obs, which is they're both great ways to do it.
yep,
um, and we've certainly used it in that way before. um, I mean,
yep.
I love it. I think it's a great protocol. I think it's as far as from a technical standpoint, I think it's better than Dante as well. And I think that we've only just started exploring the possibilities with NDI, and we're going to see lots of great stuff happening with that over the next couple of years.
Yeah, I mean, the way we're, connecting this entire studio is really all NDI based, and for specifically, we're using vMix with holographics. So when we do the demo, that would be great. So I want to make sure your internet is cleared up before we jump into the demo. Uh, I should note that Floris is joining us from Amsterdam, so we are doing this connection, transatlantic, and it's again one of those things when we talk about how video production is changing. This is a perfect example of that. The ability now to bring in people globally into a production that's basically being run by a smaller organization. So. Uh, Floris, I think it
How's the
might be
feed
good.
looking?
Okay, I think good.
Oh, there we go.
Yes, bandwidth is returned, so this is good.
Yes,
So
I've opened up the. I'll show you actually because it's nice and geeky. So here's the here's the bandwidth indicator on our router. I'm sure I'm not showing anything I shouldn't here.
so no, that's fine.
Yeah.
Yep.
So that's fine again. Just a second ago, it was pushing 100 megabits up the channel. So that's probably why you couldn't see me anymore.
Yeah, that no, this works fine. I mean, it's pretty interesting because this is the nature of live production. If you're in a
I know. Yeah.
hotel, you don't always control the pipe going out, and sometimes you just deal with the hand you're dealt. So.
Yeah, and it's 8:15 p.m. here, so it's kind of like this is the time in the weekend when the server starts pushing out our
Yep.
terabytes of backups.
So why don't we actually jump in and you show people, exactly what you can do with holographics, because I think it's really interesting.
Absolutely. Okay, so I will put up my screen,
Okay.
and what we have here is the control interface of holographics. Now, the cool thing is we are running a cloud instance of holographics here. And I have been told that you guys have enabled the render view of this cloud instance in your downstream keyer.
Yes, we did.
And so hopefully, if I click the ticker, we're going to see that render output, from like 6,000 kilometers away, appear in your live feed.
Yeah. So I mean, so everybody that's watching understands we have a system here running vMix, which is connected to the output page for holographics, and uh, in Amsterdam, Floris is actually running the control application, which is driving everything that's going up on the screen here. So this is a perfect example of remote production capabilities, the ability to take and have somebody at a distant location control aspects of a production, from that remote location. So please go on.
Right. So the cool thing about holographics is like it's HTML, right? So the overlay that you're seeing now that has my name on it, that is just HTML. And essentially, what's happening is there is a web browser being overlaid onto your feed. Now, if you're familiar with HTML, then you might know you can style it using a theme. And so we have a number of themes in here by default, and we can toggle between them. And you can see kind of all of them have like their own unique look to it
Yep.
that you can play with and do things with. And then here's the next cool part about that, right? So this theme, it derives its look and feel, its colors from this page here, and these colors is something that I can just customize. I can change these at as I please,
Yep.
and have that instantly change up on screen as well. And so let's go through a couple looks here. So let me put up something more bright.
You're actually putting up sort of color palettes. So you have a little color theory going in here for what goes with what as well, which is nice.
Yeah, you can do. I mean, I put that in there because just for pretty much just demo purposes, because I cannot come up with colors that match on my own. But it's it's really fun to play with. Actually, once you get going with this, it's hours pass. Um, but here, as you can see, um, so Clifford's asking if we need to know HTML, and so the answer is no, you don't. You can do everything with this without having any knowledge of HTML or CSS. These things that I am customizing, they get piped into that theme, and every theme has its own way of dealing with those colors. So if I produce a particular color palette, it might not work well for every theme. I might have to play around with some of these colors.
Yep.
And you can customize the theme if you want. So if you do know CSS, then you have more options at your disposal. Let me just put up something here that's a little bit more representative. Uh, right. And so if I do want to edit that, I can. You can go into this theme editor and you can edit sort of the inner guts of the theme. So the thing I always do, and I hope this is going to work because your machine might not have Comic Sans. Um, yeah, actually, you can see the clock there. So let me change. Right. So that's always my demo. Is
Yep.
I change the font to Comic Sans, which yeah. And then if I switch to a different theme, you can see all of that is it's reset to whatever that theme has.
So it also not only are you using CSS for the look and feel, but you also have a lot of the automation people see with the graphics is also, controlled essentially through, you know, web components as opposed to anything special in code.
Yes, yes. I mean everything about this is uh, you can do anything you need with this application without ever seeing a single line of CSS. Um, and A lot of this is just playing around with it. So if I just change the font size a little bit, that's gonna
Yep.
just adjust on the fly. Um, and one thing that kind of sets us apart, I suppose, from other solutions out there is that you would normally dive into After Effects or Photoshop and start drawing shapes, and or you might buy a template and then adjust the name and then kind of send that to your media player. And what's different about us is we have a set of predefined widgets, and you choose between those widgets, like your broadcast message, your ticker, your image, your lower third, whatever. You put that in, and then you add your content, and that's it. And then if you want, you can change the theme, you can replace the colors, you can change the animation even if you want.
Yep.
But that's all optional. The whole goal of this project is to get basic graphics up on screen in 5 minutes or less.
So this sort of comes back to the question that I posted at the beginning. If you remember, it was in a live graphics package. Is it simplicity or flexibility? And so really, you're saying you don't have to choose. You can get your simplicity out the box, but there is flexibility there beneath the covers that you can access if you need to.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, and there are we're not trying to kind of beat the Chiron of the world, right?
Yep.
And that's we're a small company that's beyond our abilities. Um, and but what we're aiming to do is kind of have all of that basic level functionality in there and really accessible. And then if you want the advanced functionality, you have to dive a little bit deeper, maybe learn CSS.
Yep.
Um,
So yeah, we have a question
Another
from
part of
Clifford on
that.
this. Just he's
Oh
asking
yeah.
if there's a constraint for margins or aspect ratio.
Uh, yes, in a way. I'll demo something about
Yep.
that in a second.
Yep.
One thing I want to say about this is that holographics uses just open standards with everything, right? So our widgets are HTML and JavaScript. Our styling is CSS. Our animations are JavaScript based. So those, if you first see them, they might look challenging. But the thing about it is that there are people out there who've been doing web development for dozens of years. And so you don't need specialized operator training. All you need is to find someone that already knows web development.
Yep.
So it's an open standard. We didn't invent a new standard. We went with the ones that are going mainstream. And I think that's another part of the power of holographics. It's going to really enable people to create their own custom widgets and reuse those for other things. And people are going to be able to create their own themes and share them around, um, because you don't need to have 2 weeks of training just to be able to create a single broadcast package.
So, I mean, I think one of the cool things would be to have that sort of open source community around creating these widgets, where people could publish them to a common repository and then be able to download that. So that maybe something at a future point you could consider, because it always helps to have one person who becomes sort of the repository that everybody taps into. So.
Yes. And I think as soon as we scale up the company a little bit, we're gonna be building some kind of store where people can share their themes and their widgets and their settings and all that stuff.
So you were going to get back to Clifford had asked a
Yes.
question. Yep. About.
So let me switch to my screen
Yep.
and I'll show you something. So what I'll do is I'll put up a couple of messages. So here's an hello. Can you guys open up the DSP?
Yeah. Is.
So there's one. Ooh, that's bad. Default theme. So there's one hello. And then let me pull up a second hello and show that. And now I'm going to put that in the same position. So top right.
Yep.
And so what you can see is that's kind of automatically um, uh, given itself the proper positioning. And if I change these around, see how they kind of intelligently know where they should be.
Yep.
Now, their distance to the edge of the screen is considered by the render edge margin. So you can set that up.
Yep.
And that is a relative measurement. And it's based on the current screen dimensions. So you guys are streaming 16 by 9. But
Yep.
if you were streaming 4 by 3, this would automatically get a margin, relative to your screen size, to your render portal size.
Okay. So that I Clifford, I think that covers basically this will adapt. So if you were to do something which was maybe a 9 by 16 stream, which you may be doing for something you want to use on social media, that could be something then that
Absolutely.
this would be ideal for. I think one other thing to point out is that HTML and CSS are resolution independent. So you're really working
Absolutely.
in a vector space here. So effectively, something that would scale and look good on a very small screen will also scale up to 4K uh, video, productions, and no loss in resolution, no edginess or blockiness. This is truly resolution independent as well.
Absolutely. And we've done setups where we have the same render output for a 4K stream feeding into an HD stream as well.
So, yep. So Cliff is
Are you
asking
guys
again.
bothered by that background audio, or
Uh,
should I close the door?
what I understand is that you are here on a Friday night in Amsterdam, and so a little bit of background noise is totally good. So
Absolutely. I think that's their neighbors. They're having their Friday afternoon thing.
absolutely, go for it. So
Let
yeah,
me
yeah,
yeah,
Clifford was
so
asking
that
about being an open
API,
API. Yep,
absolutely. It's a really good question. Let me switch to my screen again. I'll show you a few things.
yep.
Um, here is our documentation. Um, and that's already got a couple of things in there, but we also have a full API, and that is documented here. So if you go to the docs, you just click the API documentation, or you go down to integrations and then read all about it here. And we have a full API for WebSockets, for HTTP, and for OSC. So you can pretty much integrate holographics with anything. And then every single command that we use in our interface to drive the holographics system is represented in the API. And if you already know Node.js, we have a client SDK for that as well. So you can open that up and you can just dive right in. And this client SDK is the same one that we use for our GUI, and it's also the same one that we use to drive the companion integration. So every single feature in holographics is represented in this API, and you can do anything that you would be able to do with the interface with it. And I think I should be able to show you kind of one cool gimmicky thing. And in order to do
Sure.
that, I'm going to start up a local version of our holographics here. I am just going to open up the API and then get the current state. So you can see just by changing the URL, you can already see kind of the schematical representation of what holographics is doing in the background and get access to it.
Wow, that's so. For everybody who came here for an injection of geek, you delivered in spades. So
Absolutely, yeah.
so thank you for that. Uh, but I think one of the other things though that was one of the real reasons I wanted you to join us on the show is that you have also been part of starting up, Stream My Event. So as a small production company launching, I think there's probably a lot of people that are watching Streaming Alchemy that are in that same camp. I want to start up. So give us a little bit about what it actually took to get Stream My Event off the ground. Like, how did it come together?
Oh yeah. So what shall I say about that? So starting a company like that, it was a lot more difficult than I thought initially. We fully bootstrapped the thing, so we never got external money in to fund ourselves. So the first like year or so, every time we had a production, we were renting everything, and because we didn't have any gear, we had some small bits that you couldn't rent anywhere, but like all of the cameras, all the switcher, all the equipment was rented, and we did that for about a year, and then we bought our first real equipment. Um, and but it feels long, and you got to really kind of go through that. It's a long process of slow improvement. Um, there's definitely it's definitely a bit of a learning curve, but it gets better. And I think as you go on, you learn a bunch of tricks that you just couldn't learn any other way. And I'm really sure that our new generation of broadcasters that is currently emerging, they are gonna set the future of broadcasting because um, uh, the things that we picked up and the methods that we picked up in this process, they just can't be learned any other way.
So it's interesting because to a large extent, holographics itself came out of a need to be inventive. So I think in general, part of being in the production space is the ability to creatively problem solve, as they say, have that ability to, you know, here's what you got. How do I make it do this?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think there's a certain creativity that comes with that, being very limited in the equipment that you have, having a very specific problem to solve, and if you don't solve it, all hell's gonna break loose. That kind of thing, like it brings out the best in people, and there are so many instances that I can recall on production where we had some last second saves that nowadays we'd never have with our current setups. But back then, we learned so much from those and still produced what we wanted to produce. And I think, yeah. What was I going to say?
No, that's okay. That's okay. I mean, I think everything that you're talking about is probably something that people in this space have all experienced. So there's a shared bond over the oh my God, this is going off a cliff. What am I going to do?
Oh yeah.
So it's
Oh yeah.
it's something I think a lot of us have all had. But I guess if you were to say what are like three things that you think that if somebody is starting out they should really keep in mind. So I mean I think you touched one of them, which is that ability to be creative and creatively problem solve. But what else? Like from people prioritizing what they should be focused on.
Um, yeah, that's a good one. So I think there's two parts of that, right? There's like the video production part, and there's the starting a business part, which
Yep.
they're going to be more and more merged. For the video production part, I would say in everything you do, make sure that there is something about it that you really like. So never really do a production where you can say, "Oh man, that was crap." Every production needs to have something in it that you would enjoy, or that you imagine if you were viewing it, you might enjoy.
Yep.
And as long as you strive for that, we call them delighters. So put a delighter into anything, yeah. Um, and that makes it not just fun for you; it also just makes it fun for the people watching. A second thing, and that's more towards the business side of things. I would say really approach the business like a business, and that means you know in our industry it's easy to get caught up in, well, oh, next week I have those and those projects, and the week after I have those and those projects. And what you're not really thinking about is that half a year from now, um, there's the down season and there's no projects. So what are you going to do then? And you need to be prepared for that, and you need to be thinking about that the way a business would. So how do I do my marketing? How do I do my networking? What functions can you describe in your business, and who is going to do them and when? So let's say if you're the only one in your business and you're doing everything, make a job description for all the jobs that are in your business that you're actually doing. It doesn't matter that you're the one doing them, you should still describe them, and think about them as individual jobs. And that way, as soon as you feel like you can start growing the business, you have enough customers to start growing the business, you can just start filling those roles, and you'll already have your job description ready for the new person to come in and pick up on.
Yep.
Um, so I think that's probably, and read a lot of business books. Like if you're going to start a business, uh, you know, business books are, I learn a lot from them. I read a lot, so that's probably a good idea.
But ultimately, it's like you said about the production side. Until you actually do it, the reading alone isn't enough. And I mean, I can tell people from my side that y- everything you think you're going to, find when you start a business, you'll find 10 times more things you never really planned for. So to a certain extent, I think, having that same creative aspect with how you manage your business, the ability not to necessarily be rigid about it, but to understand that the business side deserves equal attention as the creative side, because it's really easy to get caught up in the creative side.
Absolutely, yeah, yeah. There's no, our first year, I would say we were probably too cheap, um, and it limited our growth, maybe. And as soon as you realize that, you can start you can
Yep.
start nudging that in the right direction, and things will start to change. But you have to think about it as a business, and you have to do the business side of things as well. Do the analysis.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, that's a great one
Yep.
from Clifford. Yeah, the cost associated with those roles as well. Keep track of maybe the time you spend on stuff. I've personally never time tracked my things, but it definitely you should be aware of it. Um, let me. I've two more fun tips there.
Yep.
Your bookkeeping, outsource that kind of as soon as you can. I mean, for me, it drains the life out of me. So, like, you don't need stuff in your life that drains life out of you. Um, and then the second thing is keep busy, right? And that's a mistake I've made in the past as well. If you don't have work because it is the down season and it's maybe not so busy, make sure you do something. Maybe do it for free or do it cheap. Do something that you enjoy, because that's better than sitting back and doing nothing. And if you're on a production doing doing something for free rather than being paid for it, you're still getting to know people, you're still showing the best side of you around.
And it's the
And I think that's
networking, building
probably,
the reel,
yeah,
building the
it's
resume.
absolutely,
Yeah.
yeah, getting the contacts initially is the biggest thing.
Yeah, I mean, networking, I think, is something that doesn't have an off season. You always need to be
Absolutely, yeah.
building these relationships to grow a business. And Clifford, in talking about the cost, I think there's two costs. One of them is the monetary cost, but the other is opportunity cost. I mean, you have to think of your time as an asset you're spending. So everything that you're doing in a business, or where you're focusing your attention on a production. All of those things are sort of a cost that you should sort of be able to account for and make sure you're spending your time wisely, spending your money wisely, sort of ultimately growing the business. And to Clifford's other point, he said you also need to know that your business model works. So this is something I think is very true. Getting the business model right, getting your pricing schedule right, understanding your marketplace is probably something that's taken you a while to really feel comfortable with.
Absolutely, absolutely. It's when I started off, I think I started founded my business in 2010, so that's 9 years ago, and it was a totally different business back then, and I did a lot of different things in between. And I think it's honestly taken me all this time to realize what it means to run a business. Um, and my learning curve has been slow, so I think that can be done. It can be done a lot quicker. But definitely, there's much more to running a business, like a scaled business, than meets the eye.
So, well, uh, before we end the show, why don't you tell everybody where they can find out more about holographics, where they can find out more about Stream My Event? Because I'd certainly love to have people follow up with you.
Absolutely. So, have you guys still got the downstream keyer on there?
Yep.
So why not do it like this? So hologfx.io, that is the holographics website. You can go there. You can click download, and you will get the free version for Windows or Mac. That does everything that the full version does. It's not watermarked. The only limitation is you can only have a single widget. So you can see here, I have a bunch of widgets active, and on the free version, you can only have a single one active at once. So it's a pretty simple limitation, and what that enables you to do is do really basic graphics like a lower third in just a couple minutes, and you don't even have to pay for it. And that's the business proposition of holographics.
So, all right, Floris, thank you very much for taking the time. I know we took you away from a Friday night, and you probably could have been over at your neighbors, reveling with them.
Oh, this was great. Thanks for having me.
So, thank you very much. I appreciate it. Take care.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, guys. So, for everybody that participated in this show, thank you very much. It was really great talking with Floris, and I think that if you follow up, there's probably some really interesting things you'll be able to find out from the things that they have posted on their website. So for tomorrow's for next week's show. Uh, we're going to be talking about building virtual sets. So this is something that I've gotten a lot of feedback on, where people are definitely interested in this. Uh, so I think we're going to touch on this not just from the artistic side, but some of the technical aspects to doing this successfully as well. So thank you all again for joining us, and until next week, have a good one.